Theme 6: Bhakti Sufi traditions, changes in religious beliefs and devotional texts, 8th century to 18th century AD. New textual sources available from this period include compositions attributed to the poet saints. These compositions, which were often set to music, were compiled by disciples or devotees, generally after the death of the poet saint. These traditions were fluid generations of the devotees tended to elaborate in the original message and occasionally modified or even abandoned some of the ideas that appeared problematic or irrelevant in different political, social, or cultural contexts. Using these sources thus poses a challenge to historians. Next arrow image: 12th century AD bronze sculpture of Manikavachakkar, a devotee of Shiva. Manikavachakkar was a devotee of Shiva, composed devotional songs in Tamil. First point: a mosaic of religious beliefs and practices. 1a: the integration of cults. There were there were at least two processes at work. One one was the process of disseminating Brahminical ideas. This is exemplified by the composition, compilation, and preservation of Puranic texts in simple Sanskritic verse, explicitly meant to be accessible to women and Sutras, who were generally excluded from Vedic learning. At the same time, second process at work, that of the Brahmins accepting and reworking the beliefs and practices of the other social categories. In fact, many beliefs and practices were shaped through the continuous dialogue between what sociologists have described as great Sanskrit Puranic traditions and little traditions throughout the land. Great Sanskritic Puranic traditions and little traditions throughout the land. Next arrow. The term great and little traditions were coined by a sociologist named Robert Redfield in 20th century AD to describe cultural practices of the peasant societies. He found that the peasant observed rituals and customs that emanated from dominant social categories, including priests and rulers. This is the great tradition. At the same time, peasants who followed local practices that did not necessarily correspond with these great traditions. Both these traditions changed over time through interaction. Next arrow of image: Jagannath in the extreme right, with his sister Subhadra center and his brother Balaram in Puri, Odisha. Next image of the Buddhist goddess sculpture Marichi of 10th century AD, Bihar. An example of the process of integration of different religious beliefs and practices. Next point: worship of the goddess, often simply in the form of the stone smeared with ochre, was evidently widespread. 1b: difference and conflict. Often associated with the goddesses were forms of worship that were classified as tantric were open to men and women, and practitioners often ignore differences of caste and class within the ritual context. Many of these ideas influenced Shaivism as well as Buddhism, especially in the eastern, northern, and southern parts of the subcontinent. The divergence is perhaps most divergence is perhaps most stark if we compare Vedic and Puranic traditions. The principal deities of the Vedic pantheon, Agni, Indra, and Soma, become marginal figures, rarely visible in textual and visual representations. And while we can catch a glimpse of Vishnu, Shiva, and the goddesses in the Vedic mantras, they have little in common with the elaborate. These have little in common with the elaborate Puranic mythologies. However, in spite of these obvious discrepancies, However, in spite of these obvious discrepancies, the Vedas continue to be authoritative. There were sometimes conflicts as well. Those who valued the Vedic tradition often condemned practices that went beyond the closely regulated contact with the divine through the performance of sacrifices or precisely chanted mantras. On the other hand, engaged in tantric practices frequently ignored the authority of the Vedas. The traditions of the devotion and or bhakti need to be located within this context. Devotional history had a long history of almost of 1000 years before the period we are considering. During this time, a singing and chanting of the devotional compositions was often a part of such modes of worship. This was particularly true of the Vaishnava and Shaiva sects. Second point: poems of prayer, early traditions of bhakti. In many instances, poet saints emerged as leaders around whom there developed a community of devotees. These bhakti traditions also accommodated and acknowledged women and lower caste categories considered ineligible for liberation within the orthodox Brahminical framework. Historians of religion often classify bhakti traditions into two broad categories: saguna, that is with attributes, and nirguna, without attributes. Saguna means included tradition that focused on the worship of the specific deities such as Shiva, Vishnu, and his avatars, that is, incarnations, and forms of the goddesses or Devi, all often conceptual in anthropomorphic forms. Nirguna Bhakti was worship of an abstract form of the god. Nirguna Bhakti was an worship of the abstract form of the god. 2a. The Alvars and Nayanars of Tamil Nadu. Some of the earliest The Alvars and Nayanars of Tamil Nadu. Some of the earliest Bhakti movements in the 6th century AD were led by the Alvars, that is devotion of Vishnu, and Nayanars, that is Shiva. They traveled from place to place singing hymns in the Tamil in praise of their gods. 2b. Attitudes towards caste. Some historians suggest that Alvars and Nayanars initiated a movement of protest against caste system and the dominance of the Brahmanas, or at least attempted to reform the system, include all social backgrounds, Brahmins to artisans and cultivators and untouchables. They claim that their compositions were as important as Vedas. Example: one of the major anthologies of compositions of the Alvars, the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, described as Tamil Veda. Next arrow: composition of an Alvar named Tondaradipudi, who was a Brahman. Next arrow: upper is a Nayanar saint. Bow to the Marperu's lord, that is Shiva, who resides in Marperu in Tanjavur, Tamil Nadu, as your sole refuge. Bow to Marperu's lord as your soul refuge. 2c. Woman devotees. Andal. Woman devotees. Andal was a Alvar. Her verses expressed her love for the deity. Karaikal, Amayar, Shiva, path of extreme asceticism in order to attain her goal. Her compositions were preserved within the Nayanar traditions. These women renounced their social obligations but did not join an alternative order or become nuns. Their very existence and their compositions pose a challenge to patriarchal norms. Next arrow about Alvars. By 10th century AD, the composition of the 12 Alvars were compiled in an anthology known as the Narayira Divya Prabandham, 4,000 sacred compositions. Then next arrow is about Nayanar. The poems of Appar Sambandar and Sundarar form the Tevaram, a collection compiled and classified in the 10th century AD of baths of music of the songs. Next arrow. Kraikar, Kraikar Ammayar, Kraikal Ammayar, Shiva, 12th century bronze image. Pey, Demoness, forest of Alankatu, which is a home of our father, that is Shiva. 2d. Relations with the state. Palwas and the Pandyas, 6th to 9th century CE. One of the major themes in the Tamil and Bhakti hymns is the poet's opposition to Buddhism and Jainism. This is particularly marked in the composition of the Nayanars. Next arrow showing the image of Shiva as Nataraj. Next point. Cholas from 9th to 13th century AD supported Brahminical and Bhakti traditions, making land grants and constructing temples of Vishnu and Shiva. Cholas built Shiva temples like Chidambaram, Thanjavur, and Gangaikonda Cholapuram. Representation of Shiva in bronze sculpture was influenced by vision of Nayanars. Both Nayanars and Alvars were revered by the Velala peasants as well as supported by the kings. The Chola kings, for instance, often attempted to claim divine support and proclaim their own power and status by building splendid temples that were adorned with stone and metal sculpture to recreate the visions of these popular saints who sang in the language of the people. These kings also introduced the singing of the Tamil Shiva hymns in the temples under the royal patronage, taking taking the initiative to collect and organize them into a text, that is Tevaram, 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 that is text. Inscription evidence from around 945 century AD suggests that the Chola ruler Prantaka I had consecrated metal images of Appar Sambandar and Sundarar in a Shiva temple. Consecrated means having been made or declared sacred. So Prantaka I, a Chola ruler, consecrated the metal images of the Appar Sambandar and Sundarar in the Shiva images. This also signifies that the Appar Sambandar and Sundarar were the Shiva devotees. Now next point, third point, the Veera Shaiva traditions in Karnataka. Emergence of a new movement led in Karnataka in 12th century AD by Basvanna. बांसवाना between 1106 से 68. Baswana was a Brahmin who was initially a Jain and a minister in the court of the Chalukya king. Followers known as the Veerashaivas, that is heroes of the Shiva, or Lingayas, that is wearers of the Linga. They worship Shiva in his manifestation as a Linga, and men usually wear a small Linga in a silver case on a loop strung over the left shoulder. Those who revered include the Jangama or wandering monks. Lingayats believed that on death, the devotee will be united with Shiva and will not return to his world and will not return to this world. Therefore, they do not practice funerary rites such as cremation, prescribed in the Dharma Shastras. Instead, they ceremonially bury their dead. Next arrow. Basavana composed vachanas in Kannada. Next, next point. Lingayats challenge the idea of caste and the pollution attributed to certain groups by Brahmanas. They also question the theory of rebirth. Lingayats also encourage certain practices disproved in the Dharma Shastras, such as the post-puberty marriage and the remarriage of the widows. Vachanas, that literally sayings composed in the Kannada by men as well as women. Next arrow. New religious movements. F- Many ideas of the Tamil Bhaktas, especially the Vaishnavas, were incorporated within the Sanskritic traditions, culminating in the composition of one of the best known Puranas, the Bhagavata Purana. The development of the Bhakti tradition in Maharashtra in the 13th century AD. Fourth point. Religious ferments in North India. Other religious leaders who did not function within the orthodox Brahminical framework were gaining ground. These were Naths, Jogis, Siddhas. Many of them came from artisanal groups, including weavers, who were becoming important with the development of organized craft production. Many of these new religious leaders questioned the authority of the Vedas and expressed themselves in language spoken by ordinary people. However, in spite of their popularity, their religious leaders were not in position to win the support of the ruling elites. Coming from Turks, the coming of the Turks culminated the establishment of Delhi Sultanate in 13th century AD. This undermined the power of many Rajputs and the Brahmanas who were associated with them. Fifth point. New strands in the fabric. Islamic traditions. 5a. Faiths of rulers and subjects. In 711 AD, 711 AD, an Arab general named Muhammad Qasim conquered Sindh, which became part of the Caliph's domain. Later, in the 13th century AD, the Turks and the Afghans established the Delhi Sultanate. Theoretically, Muslim rulers were to be guided by the ulama, who were expected to ensure that they ruled according to the Sharia. The situation was complicated in subcontinent due to non-Islamic subjects. It is in this context that the category of the zimmi, meaning protected, developed for people who followed revealed scriptures such as Jews and Christians and lived under the Muslim rulership. Zimmi Zimmi meaning protected derived from the Arabic word zimma, that is protection. Zimma उठा लिया, zimma, that is protection. They paid a tax called jizya and gained the right to be protected by Muslims. It was extended to Hindus as well. Next arrow. Ulama. Ulama is a plural of alim, or the one who knows. Alim, or the one who knows. Ulama are scholars of Islamic studies, perform various religious, judicial, and teaching functions. Next arrow, Sharia. Sharia is a law governing Muslim community based on the Quran, the Hadith, the traditions of the Prophet, including a record of his remembered words and deeds. Qiyas, that is reasoning by analogy, and Ijma, is the consensus of the community, were recognized as the two other sources of legislation. Thus, the Sharia evolved from the Quran, Hadith, Qiyas, and Ijma. Also, next point also, several rulers gave land endowments and granted tax exemptions to Hindu, Jaina, Zoroastrian, Christian, and Jewish religious institutions, and also expressed respect and devotion towards non-Muslim religious leaders. Example: Akbar and Aurangzeb. 4b. The popular practice of Islam. The followers of the Islam accepted in principle five pillars of the faith. First, there is one God and Prophet Muhammad as his messenger, that is Shahada. Second, offering prayers 5 times a day, that is namaz or salat. Third, giving alms, that is zakat. Fourth, fasting during the month of the Ramzan, that is Saum, SAWM. And fifth, performing the pilgrimage to Makkah, that is Hajj. Next point, Khojaz, a branch of the Ismailis, a Shia sect, Khojas, Khojaz. Next point, Jinan, Ginan, derived from the Sanskrit word Janana, Jnana, meaning knowledge, Janan. Janan. Jinan, derived from the Sanskrit word meaning Jinan, meaning knowledge, are Jinan are devotional hymns or poems recited by Shia Muslims, that is Ismailis, in Punjabi, Multani, Sindhi, Kutchi, Hindi, Gujarati, and sung in special ragas during daily prayer meetings. Some common features in the mosques, like their orientation towards Makkah, evident in the placement of the mihrab, that is prayer niche, and the minrab, that is pulpit. Variations like in the roof and building material, etc. Next arrow. Shah Hamadan Mosque in Srinagar, banks of the Jhelum, regarded as a jewel in the crown of all the existing mosques of Kashmir, built in the 1395 example of Kashmiri wooden architecture, decorated with papier mache, Papier mache. 4C. Names of communities. Historians who five historians who study texts and inscriptions dating between 8th and 14th century AD point out that the term Musliman or Muslim was virtually never used. The term for Shakas was used for The term Shaka was used for Turks and Afghans. Yavanas were used for Greeks. Malecha term. The term Malecha was a more general term for migrant communities, indicating that they did not observe the norms of the caste society and spoke languages that were not derived from the Sanskrit. Such terms sometimes had a derogatory connotation. Sixth point: growth of Sufism. Sufis turned to asceticism and mysticism in protest against the growing materialism of the caliphate as a religious and political institution. They are critical of the dogmatic definitions and scholastic methods of interpreting the Quran and Sunnah, that is, traditions of Prophet adopted by theologians. Instead, they laid emphasis on seeking salvation through intense devotion and love for God by following His commands and by following the example of Prophet Muhammad, who they regarded as a perfect human being. The Sufis thus sought an interpretation of the Quran on the basis of their personal experience. 6a. Khanqahs and Silsilas. Institutionally, the Sufis began to organize communities around the hospice, that is Dharamshala or Khanqa, that is Khanqa that is Persian. Hospice or Khanqa. Khanqa is a Persian term for hospice, that is Dharamshala. So institutionally, the Sufis began to organize communities around the hospice or Khanqa, controlled by a teaching master known as a Sheikh in Arabic, Pir or Murshid in Persian. He enrolled disciples, that is Murids, and appointed a successor, that is Khalifa. Silsila means a chain, signifying a continuous link between the master and disciple, stretching as an unbroken spiritual genealogy to the Prophet Muhammad. Dargah is a Persian term meaning court. Ziyarat or pilgrimage. Pilgrimage also means ziyarat. Urz. Urz is the death or marriage, signifying signifying the union of his soul with God. This was because people believed that in death saints were united with God and were thus closer to him than when living. People sought their blessings to attain material and spiritual benefits. Thus evolved the cult of sheikhs. Revered as Wali. Next arrow Wali. Wali is the plural. Wali का plural क्या है? Auliya. Auliya. Wali or friend of the god was a Sufi who claimed proximity to Allah, acquiring his grace, that is Barkat, to perform miracles, that is Karamat. 6b. Outside the Khanqa, many scorned the Khanqa and took the medicancy and observed celibacy, known by the names Kalandars, Madaris, Malangs, Haidaris, etc. Because of their deliberate defiance of the Sharia, they were often referred to as Be Sharia, in contrast to the Ba Sharia, Sufis who complied with it. Seventh point: the Chistis in the subcontinent. Chistis migrated to India in the late 12th century AD. 7a. Life in the Chisti Kanka. Sheikh Nizamuddin's hospice in the 14th century AD on the banks of the river Yamuna in Ghiaspur in Delhi. Big Hall, that is Jamaat Khana. On one occasion, fearing a Mongol invasion, sorry, Mongol. On one occasion, fearing a invasion, people from the neighboring areas flocked into the Khanka to seek refuge. Major teachers of the Chishti Silsila, Sufi teachers, Sheikh Moinuddin Sijzi, year of death 1245, location of Dargah, Ajmer, Rajasthan. Khwaja Kutubuddin Bakhtiar Kaki, year of death 1245, location of Dargah, Delhi. Sheikh Fariduddin Ganje Shakar. Ganj e Shakar. Year of death 1265. Location of Dargah Ajodhan, Pakistan. Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia 1325 years of death, and location of Dargah in Delhi. Sheikh Nasiruddin Chirag Delhi, year of death 1355, and location of Dargah in Delhi. Next point, Futuh, 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 unasked for charity. Futuh means unasked for charity. Visitors like poets such as the Amir Hasan Sijzi and Amir Khusrau, and the court historians Ziauddin Barni, all of whom wrote about the Sheikh Nizamuddin. Practices that were adopted including bowing before the Sheikh Nizamuddin, offering water to visitors, shaving the head of initiates, and yogic exercises representing attempts to assimilate local traditions. Next arrow, Data Ganj Bucks. In 1039 AD, Abul Hasan al-Hujvini, a native of Hujvir, Abul Hasan Hujviri, a native of Hujvir near Ghazni in Afghanistan, settled in Lahore and wrote a book in Persian called the Kashf ul Mahjub, Unveiling of the Veiled. Kashf al Mahjub to explain the meaning of the Tasawwuf and those who practiced it, that is the Sufi. Hujviri revered as Data Ganj Baksh, or the giver who bestows treasures, and his mausoleum is called the Data Darbar, or the court of the giver. Then 7b, Chishti devotionalism, ziyarat and Qawwali. Pilgrimage called ziyarat to tombs of the Sufi saints is prevalent all over the Muslim world. This is an occasion for seeking the Sufis' spiritual grace, that is barakat. Khwaja Muinuddin, popularly known as the Garib Nawaz, comforter of the poor. Next point. Earliest textual references to the Khwaja Muinuddin's Dargah date to the 14th century AD. Muhammad bin Tughlaq, ruled 1324 was the first sultan to visit the shrine of the Khwaja Muinuddin. But the earliest construction to house the tomb was founded in the late 15th century AD by Sultan Ghiyasuddin Khalji of Malwa. Since the shrine was located on the trade route linking Delhi and Gujarat, it attracted a lot of travelers. Akbar visited the tomb in 1568. Akbar visited the tomb. In 1568, Akbar offered a huge cauldron, 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 that or deg, Degh, to facilitate cooking for pilgrims. Next arrow, Jahanara's biography of Sheikh Muinuddin Chishti, titled Munis al Arwah, the Confidant of Spirits. Next point, also part of Ziyarat is the use of the music and dance, including mystical chants performed by specially trained musicians or qawwals to evoke divine ecstasy. The Sufis remembered God either by reciting the zikr, the divine names, or evoking his presence through sama, that literally audition or performance of mystical music. Sama was integral to the Chistis and exemplified interaction with indigenous devotional traditions. 7c. Languages and communication. In Delhi, those associated with the Chisti Silsila conversed in Hindavi, the language of the people. Other Sufis, such as Baba Farid, composed verses in the local languages which were incorporated in the Guru Granth Sahib. Yet others composed long poems and masnavis to express ideas of divine love, using human love as an allegory. For example, the Prem Akhyan, that is love story. The Prem Akhyan Padmavat, composed by the Malik Muhammad Jaisi, revolved around the romance of the Padmini and Ratan Sen, the king of Chittor. Such poetic compositions were often recited in hospices, usually during summer. A different genre of Sufi poetry was composed in and around the town of Bijapur in Karnataka. Short poems in Dakhani, Dakhna, short poems in Dakhani, a variant of Urdu, attributed to Chishti Sufis, probably sung by the woman while performing household chores like the grinding grain and spinning. Other compositions were in the form of the Lurinama or lullabies and Shadinama or wedding songs. It is likely that Sufis of this region were inspired by the pre-existing Bhakti traditions of the Kannada Vachanas of the Lingayats and the Marathi Abhangas of the sons of the Pandharpur. It is through this medium that Islam gradually gained a place in the villages of Deccan. Next arrow, Amir Khusro 1253 से 1325. Amir Khusro, poet, musician, and disciple of Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, gave a unique form of the Chishti Sama by introducing the call, that is Arabic saying. The hymn sung at the opening or closing of the Qawwali. Call is the hymn sung at the opening or closing of the Qawwali. This was followed by Sufi poetry in Persian, Hindi or Urdu, and sometimes using words for all of these languages. 7D. Sufi and the State. Sufi and the State. A major feature of the Chishti tradition was austerity, including maintaining a distance from the worldly power. However, this does not mean absolute isolation from political power. The Sultan set up charitable trusts, that is, Awqaf, AUQAF. The sultans set up charitable trust Awqaf as endowments for hospices and granted trade-free land, that is, Inam. Chishtis accepted donations in cash and kind. Kings did not simply need to demonstrate their association with the Sufis, they also required legitimation from them. When the Turks set up the Delhi Sultanate, they resisted the insistence of the ulema on imposing Sharia as state law because they anticipated opposition from their subjects, the majority of whom were non Muslims. The sultans then sought out the Sufis, who derived their authority directly from the god and did not depend on the jurist to interpret the Sharia. However, there were instances of conflict between the sultans and the Sufis. To ascend this authority, both expected that certain rituals be performed, such as prostration and kissing of the feet. Occasionally, the occasionally the Sufi Sheikh was addressed with high-sounding titles. Example: the disciples of the Nizamuddin Aulia addressed him as the Sultan ul Mashayikh, literally Sultan amongst sheikhs. Next arrow: other Sufis like Surhavardi under the Delhi Sultans and the Naqshbandi under the Mughals were also associated with the state. However, the modes of their association were not the same as those of the Chistis. Next image: the Dargah of the Sheikh Salim Chisti, a direct descendant of the Baba Farid, constructed in Fatehpur Sikri, Akbar's capital, symbolized the bond between the Chistis and the Mughal state. Eighth point: new devotional paths, dialogue, and descent in the northern India. 8a. Kabir, 14th to 15th centuries AD. Kabir was a poet saint. Verses ascribed to Kabir have been compiled in three distinct but overlapping traditions. Kabir Bijak, first Kabir Bijak is preserved by Kabir Panth, the path or sect of the Kabir in Varanasi and elsewhere in UP. Second, the Kabir Granthawali is associated with the Dadu Panth in Rajasthan. Third, many of his compositions are found in the Adi Granth Sahib. So, verses ascribed to Kabir have been ascribed in three distinct but overlapping traditions of Kabir Bijak, Kabir Granthawali, and Adi Granth Sahib. Next point. Some poems are composed in the special languages of the Nirguna poets and the Sant Bhasha. Others, known as the Ulta Bansi, that is upside down sayings, are written in a form in which everyday meanings are inverted. Expressions such as the lotus which blooms without flower and the fire raging in the ocean convey a sense of Kabir's mystical experiences. The range of traditions Kabir drew, the range of traditions Kabir drew on to describe the ultimate reality. These include Islam, Vedantic traditions, Yogic traditions. From Islam, he described the ultimate reality as Allah, Khuda, Hazrat, Pir. From Vedantic traditions, Alakh, A-L-A-K-H, Alakh, the unseen, Nirankar, the formless, the Brahman, and the Atman, etc. From Yogic traditions, Shabd, that is sound, or Shunya, that is emptiness. Next point. Diverse and sometimes conflicting ideas are expressed in these poems. Some poems draws on Some poems draw on Islamic ideas and use monotheism and iconoclasm to attack Hindu polytheism and idol worship. Others use the Sufi concept of the zikr and ishq, that is love, to express the Hindu practice of Nam Simran, that is remembrance of the God's name. Hagiographies within the Vaishnava tradition attempted to suggest that he was born a Hindu. Kabir Das, Kabir and Kabir, a Arabic word meaning great, but was raised by Julahas. He was initiated into bhakti by a guru, perhaps Ramananda. 8b. Baba Guru Nanak, 1469 to 1539. Born in Nankana Sahib near River Ravi, he trained to be an accountant and studied Persian. He advocated a form of Nirguna Bhakti, rejected sacrifices, ritual baths, image worship, austerities, and the scriptures of both Hindus and Muslims. The Absolute or Rab had no gender or form. To connect to the divine by remembering and repeating the divine name, expressing his ideas through hymns called the Shabad in Punjabi. Baba Guru Nanak would sing these compositions in various ragas while his attendant Mardana played the rabab. He organized his followers into a community. He set up rules for congregational worship, that is Sangat, involving collective recitations. He appointed one of his disciples, Angad, to succeed him as the preceptor, that is Guru. The fifth preceptor, Guru Arjan, compiled Baba Guru Nanak's hymns along with those of the Nanak's four successors and other religious poets like the Baba Farid, Ravidas or Raidas and Kabir in the Adi Granth Sahib. These hymns called Gurbani are composed in various languages. Tenth preceptor Guru Gobind Singh included the compositions of the ninth Guru Guru Tegh Bahadur, and this sculpture is called the Guru Granth Sahib. Guru Gobind Singh also laid the foundation of the Khalsa Panth, that is the army of the pure, and defined its five symbols: uncut hair, a dagger, a pair of swords, a comb, and a steel bangle. Next image. 15th century AD stone sculpture in Tamil Nadu depicting Krishna playing a flute, a form of the deity worshipped by Mirabai. So 8C Mirabai. 15th 16th century AD biographies have been reconstructed primarily from the bhajans attributed to her. According to some traditions, her preceptor was Raidas, a leather worker. Mirabai did not attract a sect or group of followers. Her songs continue to be sung by women and men, especially those who are poor and considered low caste in Gujarat and Rajasthan. Ninth point, reconstructing histories of religious traditions. Based on sculpture, architecture, stories about religious preceptors, compositions attributed to women and men engaged in the quest of understanding the nature of the divine. Next arrow. Shankardeva in the late 15th century AD was Vaishnavism in Assam. Teachings often known as the Bhagavati Dharma because they were based on the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad Purana, focused on absolute surrender to the supreme deity, in this case Vishnu. He emphasized the need for Nam Kirtan, recitation of the names of the Lord in satsanga or congregation of the pious devotees. Shankara, Shankardeva also encouraged the establishment of satra or monasteries for the transmission of spiritual knowledge and namghar or prayer halls, satra or monasteries. Many of these institutions and practices continue to flourish in the region. His major compositions include the Kirtana Ghosh, double arrow, variety of sources used to reconstruct the history of Sufi traditions. First, treatises or manuals dealing with the Sufi thought and practices. Example, the Kashf ul Mahjub of Ali bin Usman Huzviri. It enables historians to see how traditions outside the subcontinent influenced Sufi thought in India. Second, Malfuzat, uttered, literally uttered conversations of Sufi saints. An early text of Malfuzat is the Fawad al Fuad, a collection of conversations of Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, compiled by Amir Hassan Shijzi Dehlavi, a noted Persian poet. Source 9 contains an excerpt from this text. Malfuzats were compiled by different Sufi silsilas with the permission of the Sikhs. These had obvious didactic purposes. Third, Maktubat, literally written, collection of the letters. The letters known as the Maktubat A. Imam Rabbani of the noted 7th century Naqshbandi Sheikh Ahmad Sar Hindi 1624, whose ideology is often contrasted with the liberal and the non-sectarian views of Akbar, are amongst these most frequently discussed by scholars. Fourth point, Tazkiras, literally to mention and memorialize. Tazkiras, to mention and memorialize biographical accounts of the saints. The 14th century AD, Siyar ul Aulia of Mir Khurd Kirmani was the first Sufi tazkira written in India. It dealt principally with the Chishti saints. The most famous tazkira is the Akhbar ul Akhyar of Abdul Haq Muhaddis Dehlavi 1642. Abdul Haq Muhaddis Dehlavi, the authors of tazkiras, often sought to establish the precedence of their own orders and glorify their spiritual genealogies. Next arrow. Some major religious teaches in the subcontinent. 500 से 800 CE. अपर समंदर सुंदरमूर्ति in Tamil Nadu. 800 से 900 नम्मलवार मनिक्का व चक्कर अंडल तोंदारा दिपोदी in Tamil Nadu. 1000 से 1100 अल हुजवीरी दातागंज बख्श in पंजाब and रामानुजाचार्य in Tamil Nadu. 1100 से 1200 बासवन in कर्नाटका. 1200 से 1300 जनन देव Muktabai in Maharashtra, Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti in Rajasthan, Bahauddin Zakaria and Fariduddin Ganj-e-Shakar in Punjab, Kutubuddin Bakhtiar Kaki in Delhi, 1300 से 1400, लाल देद इन कश्मीर, लाल शाहबाज कलंदर इन सिंध, निजामुद्दीन औलिया इन दिल्ली, रामानंदा in UP, चोखा मिल्ला in Maharashtra and Sharafuddin Yahuya Maneri in Bihar, 1400 से 1500, कबीर रायदास सूरदास in UP, बाबा गुरु नानक in the Punjab, वल्लभाचार्य in Gujarat, Abdullah Abdullah Shatari in Gwalior, Muhammad Shah Alam in Gujarat, Mir Sayyid Muhammad Gesu Daraz in Gulbarga, Shankaradevan in Assam, Shankardev in Assam, Tukaram in Maharashtra, 1500 से 1600, श्री चैतन्य in Bengal, मीराबाई in Rajasthan, Sheikh Abdul Qudus Gangohi, Malik Muhammad Jaisi Tulsidas in UP, 1600 से 1700, Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi in Haryana and Mian Mir in Punjab, Tulsidas in UP in 1500 1600 1600 से 1700, Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi in Haryana, Mian Mir in Punjab.